Hey, good evening. This is Ramon again with Bold Like a Leopard. Subscribe to Bold Like a Leopard on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. They're all under Bold Like a Leopard. The Bold Like a Leopard blog is struttingleopard.blogspot.com. And I'm going to be doing less videos per week just because I have a job that's much more time consuming right now. We're going to be talking today about what it really means, this scandal with Obama and Trump and the FISA courts. People don't know what FISA courts are. I hardly know what they are, but what's the issue here? And people have this misunderstanding that if Trump is complaining about a wiretap, and it's not a classic wiretap, that he must be full of shit. That's not really the issue. What's going on is that there happen to be a lot of issues that keep cropping up with the media where they publish material that appears to contradict or rather compromising information that has to do with President Trump that must have been gotten from a source that leaked it. And that in and of itself is a problem. It was a problem, whatever administration you're talking about, it was a problem under President Bush. It was a problem, and that would be the Bradley Manning issue. It was a problem under President Obama, which is the same thing. And the media seems to think that this tug of war is really an issue of Donald Trump versus the truth, when in reality it's an issue of our intelligence deep state, which everybody's talking about now. People are talking about the deep state now. They've never talked about it before. In reality, in some countries, it's been a huge issue for years. In Turkey, for example, countries where there have been a lot of military coups, where democratic governments have been overthrown before. South Korea, Brazil. You could talk about Argentina. The deep state is an issue where we start to wonder whether the tail is wagging the dog. It's the same issue that was going on during the Nixon years, some would say. And suddenly people are discovering it because the problem here has nothing to do with whether it's a classic wiretap on the telephone or whether they hacked one of his electronic information systems like his email or the campaign email or anything like that, or whether they actually bugged his room. You know, if you ever seen that movie Enemy of the State with Will Smith, if they did something like that, that would be a huge issue. Huge. If just to paraphrase Trump himself, you would have something here. While technically it could be legal, it would be literally the government spying on its political opponents. Now, what's another issue here? Why were they spying on Donald Trump to begin with? The media story so far has been, look, we don't care if he's been elected president. It seems as if he's tied to Russia. Well, while speaking on NBC's Meet the Press yesterday, James Clapper actually admitted that he has no evidence that Trump colluded with Russia. So I'm going to include the video in the description, but he says this. James Clapper says to Chuck Todd on Meet the Press yesterday, "We did not include any evidence in our report," and I say our. That's NSA, FBI, and CIA with my office, the Director of National Intelligence, that had any reflection of collusion between members of the Trump campaign and the Russians. There was no evidence of that included in our report. Then Todd says, "I understand that, but does it exist?" Clapper answers, "Not to my knowledge." Todd asks again, if it existed, it would have been in this report? Clapper answers, "This could have unfolded or become available in the time since I left the government. But at the time, we had no evidence of such collusion." So what this essentially means, you have to understand. Okay, let me pull my notes up. The problem is that if it turns out, now Clapper is denying in the same interview that there was a FISA request or that there was a FISA wiretap granted, either one, I'm not sure which, but there is actually, it's factually known that they requested a FISA court to approve a wiretap of Donald Trump. In any case, if it were to be discovered that a wiretap was performed, okay, we would then have to ask based on what grounds. And if there's no evidence that's been unearthed, that Donald Trump did collude with Russia, and then that brings up a couple of other issues. Okay? First of all, Clapper claims that he would have known of a FISA court order. If it turns out that there had been a wiretap and Clapper did not know, then who would have approved it? Who would have monitored it? He's the director of national intelligence. This would sort of go and prove that he was kind of a puppet. He was a little figurehead. In reality, somebody else was controlling this wiretap. The information here would have been fed through somebody else, and his position as that director of national intelligence would be rendered completely trivial. He would be that this would. Let me explain it this way. This would be like the equivalent of the fire chief in your town basically not knowing when his engines are in or out of the station. Okay, that's the way it is. At a certain point, you have to know what's going in and what's going out. He said that in the interview in terms of the wiretaps. Now, let me explain one other thing. It doesn't matter if it's Trump Tower or if it's Trump Taj Mahal, which isn't his anymore. But let's say, for argument's sake, if any Trump property or any Trump electronic device or server or whatever that's been hacked or been used as a listening device of the Trump campaign, it doesn't matter anymore. If there's a proof of this, it raises a major question of if the government has performed an invasion of privacy here. And it becomes worse if you start to ask which people did the government tap, if they did tap them. Let's say they were to tap somebody like Corey Lewandowski, his old former campaign manager. If they were to tap somebody like Steve Bannon, before he was working for Trump, he was also a journalist. Okay, that would technically, depending on when the wiretap was performed, that would be monitoring a member of the press, which they've already done before and nobody cared about. What if they were monitoring one of Trump's kids? Okay, and that would end up, you would start to wonder how do things end up arriving to the gossip columns concerning his children? Ivanka or Eric or Donald Trump Jr. It's a major issue. What we're seeing here is a huge topic. It could make the Hillary scandal look like, basically a mouse caught in a mousetrap. That's how huge this scandal could be. So anyway, the question is, what is their justification for a wiretap if there was no uncovered evidence? Let me emphasize again. If Clapper himself stated on national TV that he didn't find any evidence in any of his reports up until he left office to suggest that Trump colluded with Russia, then the wiretap, if it were to be discovered, would they can't retroactively say, oh, now we have grounds to do it. Now we have probable cause. You either have probable cause when you issue the wiretap, or you don't issue a wiretap. You can't do it afterwards. It's not like that would be a major overreach. That would be an abuse of power. I don't know what statute that would be under, but Trump could probably sue the government for millions and millions of dollars today. I actually had an argument with my dad about it. Now, the other issue is what happens with that information. Now, there's been all of this information that's been disseminated around the intelligence agencies due to a last-minute executive order on Obama's part, where he removed certain restrictions on the distribution of certain intelligence information from the NSA. The NSA, as you all know, if you've been paying attention, is probably the most electronically connected intelligence service that we have. You know, the FBI, CIA, and all that. They also have electronic, you know, in terms of hacking and telephones and all that. They also have elements of that, but they're nothing compared to the NSA. So if it were to be discovered that this information from a wiretap was being distributed among Obama loyalists in the government, this would be grounds for indicting a lot of these people for conspiracy. Maybe not Obama himself, but the question is who and which intelligence chiefs would it be? This would be one of the biggest scandals, maybe the biggest scandal in the history of the U.S. intelligence community, maybe the history of the U.S. government in general. It's mind-blowing. Think about it this way. You get a wiretap that's illegal. That's strike one. The wiretap uncovers no evidence of foreign collusion. That's strike two. The wiretap, let's hypothesize, okay? This is only a guess. But the wiretap also uncovers that Jeff Sessions met with the Russian ambassador, okay? Now, I'm not saying that that's for sure, because it's possible they could find out that he met with the Russian ambassador through his own records or through news reports or through their own knowledge and memos that they had. There's even a suggestion that he met with them at the behest of the Obama administration. But let's say they did wiretap Jeff Sessions. So that's a second person that they baselessly wiretapped with no evidence of collusion. Okay, so that's strike three. And then there's more strikes. The next strike is that they don't uncover any evidence. Okay, maybe I did say that, sorry. But if they still have not uncovered any evidence of collusion on the part of Sessions, for example, based on those meetings, then that's another thing, that they have no probable cause for that wiretap under FISA. Now, the next problem is what happens to that wiretap information. The contents of a federal investigation, it's not like that's public knowledge. In fact, it's very much, that would probably be, you know, that would be the equivalent of the government taking your medical records and splashing them all over the internet, what they did. And for that to be leaking now, you know, piecemeal to the media, that sort of shows you the type of mentality that the Obamas had in power. They went and they mounted this massive, you know, effort to appear as if they're going to be a transparent administration. The opposite's been true. We have no clue what the fuck they did. It's almost scary. Who knows what they've been doing with the information they've gathered on all of us Americans? I mean, if you're like me and you have a Yahoo account, you must be like shaking in your boots. Now, I've kind of like taken the attitude, anything that I do on the internet, I don't really care anymore. It's sort of, you know, I try to be responsible. I don't go to shit that's going to get me in trouble. But think of all the people that have already gotten in trouble for things that they go look at on the internet. It's really, this is the beginning of the question. If Obama might have opened a new chapter where it's validating all of our fears about the Pandora's box of government surveillance in the electronic age. It's really breathtaking how a president that brought so much hope to so many people is actually causing so much destruction to the society that he thought he was going to save. Anyway, I can't stay today. I think we've covered a lot of ground in such a short amount of time. So we're going to keep watching for this. Look, I can't say for sure that he did wiretap him. He did wiretap Trump, but I can't say for sure that he did wiretap Trump. But what would happen if it were to be revealed that it's true? And I think my prediction is that it's true. Okay, that's just a prediction. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not guaranteeing anything, but we've seen him do it before. We've seen him do it to other people. We've seen the behavior that he's showing since he left the White House. His brazen arrogance and hanging out with Richard Branson and going around. He is acting like royalty right now, President Obama. And I think that this is the pride before the fall. If it's discovered that he did this, his entire legacy, it's more than the legacy that's been destroyed through Obamacare getting repealed, through losing the White House to the Republicans in the form of his worst enemy, Donald Trump. It's more than that. It's becoming, if this were to be true, it would wreck his legacy entirely. It would show that the entire liberal establishment has gone hand in hand with the worst nightmare of American government oppression in history. This would make Watergate look like a joke. It would make all the Clinton scandals also pale in comparison. Although, I mean, you know, let's be honest, they got away with a lot of shady shit anyway, and they did a few similar things like Filegate. The difference is that back when the Clintons were in power, a lot of this stuff wasn't possible because of technology. If they had been in power back then, or they had been in power during our times, you know, it's funny to think back in the 90s, which was less than 30 years ago. You know, I'm feeling old now, but we didn't have this capability, at least not as much as we have now, where the government is literally able to go beyond your doorstep and into your entire life, to ruin your entire life by using you and your communications against you. The government was not as easily able to do that back then, although people were already predicting it. Like I said, you can watch the movie Enemy of the State, and it will show you that it was all predicted, that people would be incriminated by their own deeds through a government that's just collecting information, waiting to incriminate you. And on that positive note, this is Ramon with Bold Like a Leopard. Subscribe to Bold Like a Leopard on YouTube and on Facebook and on Twitter. And follow us on Twitter. And have a great night. We'll see you around the bend.